Welcome to Wisdom Planet, wisdom worth spreading. Happy listening. Today, I want to share with all of you a book called Think Again, The Power of Knowing What You Don't Know. The concept of rethinking is not unfamiliar. In short, it refers to reflecting on learning, or thinking again. The well-known saying, "I reflect on myself 3 times a day," embodies this idea. Through self-reflection, people can identify their shortcomings, break free from fixed thinking patterns, and continuously improve. This principle seems to be common knowledge, but why do some people still write books specifically to discuss it? The author of the book, Adam Grant, is an organizational psychologist and professor at the Wharton School of Business. He has been voted as the most popular lecturer at the school for 7 consecutive years. Not only that, he has also been recognized as one of the top 10 most influential management thinkers, globally. Grant is also an outstanding writer, with best-selling books such as Originals, and a total sales of over 2 million copies. Years of teaching and research have led him to discover that people are not as good at rethinking as they think they are, and they also lack the necessary tools in this regard. For example, some people, in order to meet their parents' expectations, engage in jobs they do not love for decades, locking their life goals in one direction without ever stopping to re-examine their true interests, suitable careers, and what they expect to gain from their work. As a result, although they are on what seems to be the right path, they ultimately reach the wrong destination. Another example is that studies show that those determined mountaineers are more likely to die during their expeditions because they are determined to climb to the top at all costs, disregarding the fact that sometimes the best perseverance is choosing to give up. In a sense, we are all conservatives in our thinking, preferring to stick to old beliefs rather than confront new ideas. So, how do we break the shackles of our thinking and engage in rethinking? This is precisely the theme explored in the book, Think Again. In this book, Grant shows us through numerous cases how people are bound by their fixed perspectives and how to embark on rethinking. In the following interpretation, I will conduct in-depth psychological analysis of each case mentioned in the book to help you have a more comprehensive understanding of the concept of rethinking. In the first part, we will start from a personal perspective and explore, along with the author, the factors that hinder us from rethinking through 3 specific cases, as well as seek solutions. In the second part, we will engage in an exciting debate to discuss how to pass on this thinking ability to others and inspire more people to engage in rethinking. Okay, let's officially move on to the first part. First, let's take a look at how a successful entrepreneur, in this rapidly changing era, loses opportunities time and time again and eventually gets abandoned by the time simply because they fail to rethink. Mike Lazaridis is the inventor, founder, and CEO of BlackBerry smartphones. He is a very thoughtful and creative person who has always dreamed of changing the wireless communication industry, and he has indeed achieved it. In 1999, the BlackBerry smartphone was introduced, with features like a computer-like full keyboard, dedicated email push service, and a secure and reliable system. These characteristics made BlackBerry smartphones the leader in the global smartphone market for a long time. Whether it was corporate executives or Hollywood stars, everyone wanted to own a BlackBerry smartphone. By the summer of 2009, BlackBerry smartphones held nearly half of the US smartphone market share. However, just 5 years later, by 2014, BlackBerry's market share plummeted to less than 1%. What happened in between? In 2007, Steve Jobs launched the first-generation iPhone, which eliminated the physical keyboard and replaced it with a full touchscreen. At that time, Lazaridis did not see this as a threat, as he believed not everyone could type on a glass surface. Then, in 2008, the global market began transitioning from 2G to 3G, and the internet and mobile phones started to collide. Apple and Android both launched open app stores. However, Lazaridis still firmly believed that people needed a phone for sending and receiving work emails and making calls, rather than a phone filled with entertainment applications. In 2010, Lazaridis also gave up on instant messaging services, missing out on the equivalent of China's WeChat, WhatsApp. In Lazaridis' eyes, BlackBerry phones were always productivity tools for typing emails with a keyboard. He only wanted to serve a few million die-hard fans, unaware that he was giving up a market of billions of people. Why is Lazaridis unwilling to reconsider? According to author Grant, this is because the BlackBerry phone symbolizes Lazaridis' self-identity to some extent, and rethinking threatens his sense of self-identity. Just like many firefighters who sacrifice themselves in wildfires, they could have discarded their equipment to gain enough escape time, but few people think of this. Why? Organizational psychologist Carl Weick explains, tools are the primary reason firefighters are entrusted with the task of extinguishing fires. Therefore, abandoning tools would trigger an existential crisis for firefighters. Without tools, who am I? It's the same for Lazaridis. If the BlackBerry phone is no longer a productivity tool for sending and receiving emails, then is it still a BlackBerry phone? If the BlackBerry phone changes, then who is Mike Lazaridis, the one who created all this? In fact, when we are doing things, each of us instinctively wants to refer to and replicate past successful experiences, which is understandable. However, when the external environment changes rapidly, this approach becomes very dangerous because any advantage or asset, if not occasionally taken out and polished, will eventually become a liability. In the face of a rapidly changing environment, how should we rethink? The author believes that the key lies in separation. Separate the past you from the present you, separate your viewpoints from your identity. What does it mean? First of all, separating your past self from your present self means daring to make mistakes and accepting the unknown. Many people are afraid of making mistakes and always hold the attitude of preferring no results rather than encountering problems. If we rethink the impact of making mistakes, we will find that another meaning of making mistakes is actually growth. Just like Ray Dalio, the founder of Bridgewater Associates, said, if you don't look back at yourself and think, wow, I was really foolish a year ago, then you haven't learned much in the past year. So, we should enjoy the moments of making mistakes because making mistakes gives us the opportunity to correct our existing beliefs. This means that compared to before, the number of erroneous beliefs decreases as we constantly iterate and upgrade ourselves. Secondly, separate your opinions from your identity and define your identity based on your values rather than your opinions. The author believes that self-identity is best defined by shared values. Who you are should be defined by your values. You can be someone who seeks knowledge or someone who values fairness. Values are not easily changed, so new opinions like rethinking the positioning of smartphone features, as long as they align with one's values, will not easily threaten one's self-identity. On the contrary, you should not consider yourself as a spokesperson for certain opinions, such as being against global warming or advocating for physical keyboards. These are unreliable because opinions can change and become outdated at any time. If unstable opinions are tied to one's self-worth, consequently, the self becomes unstable and it becomes difficult to engage in rethinking. If the previous case was a negative example of rethinking, then the following case is a classic textbook example of rethinking. Alright, without further ado, let's take a look at how a presidential candidate with little hope of winning turned their imposter syndrome into an advantage and ultimately defeated their competitors. What can we learn from this? In psychology, there is a term called imposter syndrome, which refers to a tendency of self-doubt and self-denial. It is when someone, despite achieving many accomplishments, feels like an imposter and believes they do not deserve these achievements. In simple terms, it means lacking confidence. Hala Thomas-Daughter is such a woman with imposter syndrome. Hala is an excellent entrepreneur and also one of the former presidential candidates in Iceland. On December 1, 2015, Hala unexpectedly received a phone call, saying that someone had started a petition online, hoping that she would run for the presidency of Iceland. Hala's initial reaction was not excitement, but self-doubt. She thought to herself at that time, how can I become a president? From the perspective of others, Hala is definitely qualified to participate in the presidential election. Although she lacks political experience, she is an outstanding leader. She has helped others establish a university and co-founded an investment company with others in 2007. When the global financial crisis hit in 2008, Iceland experienced the most severe financial crisis in human history, but Hyla successfully led her company through the difficulties with excellent leadership and decision-making skills. Even so, Hyla hesitated for a long time, and it was only under the urging and persuasion of her family and friends that she decided to participate in the election. There were more than 20 candidates participating in the election, and as an unknown candidate, Hyla's campaign was destined to be full of challenges. One powerful competitor among them was David's odd son. David's was completely opposite to Hyla. If Hyla was overly modest, then David's was overly confident. David's believed that he had considerable experience and knowledge and was fully capable of performing the duties of the president. However, in reality, he was identified by Time magazine as one of the 25 main culprits of the global financial crisis. In order to force him to resign as the central bank governor, the parliament even had to pass an unconventional law: any head of an institution must have at least a master's degree in economics. Let's take a look at the election results. Although Hyla did not have any cover interviews or a large election budget, she still won over 1/4 of the votes on election day, ranking second. Hyla did not win the presidency, but she completely defeated the overconfident Davis, who ranked fourth and received less than 14% of the votes. This is a remarkable achievement, and she became famous because of it. Author Grant once invited Hyla to share in his classroom, and Hyla reflected that the psychological motivation that supported her to go all the way was the imposter syndrome. Through the election process, she gained a deeper understanding of self-doubt. Previously, Hyla believed that self-doubt weakened her power, but now she has a different interpretation of self-doubt. She believes that doubt does not question her abilities, but rather signifies the need to improve tools and methods. While other candidates were satisfied with traditional media coverage such as television and newspapers, Hyla's uncertainty about tools made her rethink how her campaign should progress. She adopted methods that other candidates rarely used, shifting the focus to social media. She personally responded to messages on social media late at night, interacted with live broadcasts on Facebook, and even tried using video software to reach out to more young people. These actions resonated strongly with voters and earned her more votes. We don't have to be someone with imposter syndrome, constantly doubting and questioning ourselves, but we can find the key to rethinking in it. That is, what we should have confidence in, what we should doubt, and how to find a balance between excessive confidence and excessive humility. The author believes that the balance point is confident humility. Simply put, you can believe that you can achieve a certain goal in the future while maintaining a humble attitude to question whether your current methods are appropriate, just like Hyla did. Arrogance makes us ignore our own weaknesses. Humility is a mirror that helps us see our weaknesses clearly, and confident humility is a corrective lens that enables us to overcome our weaknesses. The first two cases we mentioned were about the impact of rethinking by an individual. But what if it's a group of people? Would the effect be even better? Let's take a look at the last case, where a team full of conflicts and struggles used the power of rethinking to create an Oscar-winning animation. In 1995, Pixar released its first feature-length animated film, Toy Story, which grossed $360 million worldwide and became the highest-grossing film of the year in the United States. However, the company's founder wanted to make some breakthroughs and changes. So, in 2000, he invited director Brad Bird to drive the transformation. Soon, Bird came up with an ambitious idea: to create a superhero film that could realistically render explosions and tiny details like human hair using new generation animation technology. When he presented this vision, members of Pixar's technical team thought it would take 10 years and $500 million to complete, making the idea somewhat unrealistic. However, Brad had no intention of giving up. He created a challenger team and led this group of people to start creating animation. It is worth mentioning that the members of this team are not ordinary. They are not animation masters, but rather those who are seen as unconventional by others in the company. They have better ways of doing things but are frustrated because they cannot showcase their abilities. The characteristic of these people is that they dare to express themselves, dare to question, and even nitpick. For example, they would argue endlessly about how far back the character's hairline should be. But fortunately, their goal is the same, to make the work the best it can be. They brainstormed and found affordable alternatives to expensive technology, and sought alternative solutions to tricky problems. In the end, Pixar's most complex film, The Incredibles, was released. It took 4 years and cost less than $100 million, but it earned over $600 million at the box office and won the Academy Award for Best Animated Feature. Looking back, it seems that Brad didn't do anything particularly special. He simply brought together a group of low agreeableness individuals, those who are critical, skeptical, and challenging to work with. Generally, we hope for harmony among team members and try to avoid conflicts, but Brad went against the norm and sought to establish a challenging interpersonal network. This may seem detrimental to the team's development, but it actually produced very positive results. Why is that? Because, the absence of conflict does not necessarily mean harmony, sometimes it signifies indifference. Just think about it, if every member complies with each other and when asked for opinions, they all say, "It's fine, no objections," is that really a good thing? The author believes that silence or not expressing one's views is actually a disregard for the value of each person's perspective, a lack of respect for our ability to voice different opinions. A team with only one voice is not conducive to rethinking. On the contrary, engaging in arguments with someone and doubting their viewpoint is not disrespectful, but rather a display of respect. It means that one values the other person's perspective enough, because if the other person's opinion is not important to them, they wouldn't bother to refute it. One point to note is that the author is not saying that conflict is always good or that having conflict always leads to rethinking. The key lies in the type of conflict. Australian organizational psychologist Karen E. Jen has identified 2 types of conflict: relationship conflict and task conflict. Relationship conflict is characterized by friction and hostility, involving personal emotions and conflicts that are against the person, not the issue. On the other hand, task conflict involves conflicts arising from ideas and viewpoints, focusing on the issue rather than the person. Although the Brad team consists of less agreeable individuals who often experience friction and disagreements, their conflicts are task-related rather than relationship-related. They are not hesitant to express various viewpoints, but they do not engage in personal attacks. After resolving some differences of opinion, they are able to realign themselves and continue working together until new issues arise for further debate. However, managing less agreeable individuals is not an easy task, as slight carelessness can turn task conflicts into relationship conflicts. How can we prevent this transformation between the two? In fact, we can glimpse a clue in Brad's case. Conflicts only stimulate creativity in the ability to rethink when people feel accepted, supported, and trusted. This part of the content is a bit long, let's summarize it. How can we break through the confines of our thinking and achieve a fresh perspective? First, don't give up on rethinking in order to maintain your self-identity. Try to separate yourself from your past self and your viewpoints, and cultivate the habit of rethinking. Second, when you have a tendency to doubt yourself, see it as an opportunity for growth. You can have confidence in your ability to learn while questioning your current solutions to the problem, achieving a confident humility. Finally, don't be afraid of conflict. Accept the challenge from critics. Although relationship conflicts can be uncomfortable, task conflicts can often help you rethink. Okay, after discussing how we can rethink ourselves, let's now see how we can encourage more people to rethink. This is particularly important and closely related to our lives. For example, when we want leaders to accept our proposals, persuade our parents not to buy unnecessary health products, or warn children to spend less time on computers, we often feel like we're putting in a lot of effort but still can't convince the other person. In such situations, you need to find a way to make the other person rethink. To make others accept your point of view and reconsider, a typical event is a debate. So, next, let's find some good methods to make others reconsider through a fascinating debate. In February 2019, in San Francisco, USA, a top British debater, Harish, and an AI debater developed by IBM, Deborah, had an outstanding debate on the topic of, should preschool education be financially subsidized by the government? Deborah represented the affirmative side, arguing that preschool education should receive financial subsidies. Harish represented the opposing side, arguing that preschool education should not receive financial subsidies. Before the debate started, the audience overwhelmingly supported the affirmative side, represented by the AI debater Deborah, with a support rate as high as 79%. However, after the debate, Deborah's support rate dropped to 62%, while the human debater Harish's support rate increased from 13% to 30%, ultimately winning the debate. Harish managed to persuade some of the audience members to reconsider their positions. How did he achieve this? What can we learn from him about the art of debating? Let's discuss in detail. Deborah is not debating with humans for the first time. Based on her past performance, she is not inferior and even excels in certain aspects compared to humans. Her knowledge base consists of 400 million articles, mostly from authoritative newspapers and magazines. She can use an opinion detection engine to locate key arguments, determine the scope of the topic, and weigh evidence. It is not surprising that Deborah, as the affirmative side, speaks first. She cites a large amount of data to explain the benefits of early childhood education in the United States from academic, social, and professional perspectives. For example, good early childhood education can help children overcome disadvantages related to poverty, and so on. Faced with Deborah's strong argument, Harish did not rush to explain his own viewpoint or present opposition. Instead, he reiterated their shared perspective on poverty issues, affirmed the validity of the research Deborah had cited, and said, "I believe our differences are not as significant as they may seem." Harish's move was quite enlightening, so let's pause here and discuss it carefully. When we want to persuade someone, many people tend to directly present their own viewpoints. For example, if you want to convince a friend to smoke less, you might say, "What's so good about smoking? It's bad for your health. Look at so-and-so, they've ruined their lungs from smoking." It may be logical and supported by evidence, but the other person may not necessarily agree with you. They might think, "What do you know? You don't even know why I smoke." So, in order to make the other person reconsider, we ourselves must also reconsider. In other words, we need to learn how to actively listen and empathize. This doesn't mean that you agree with the other person's viewpoint, but rather that you are trying to understand their feelings and thoughts. The benefit of doing this is that it can bring both parties to the same level for communication, instead of creating a sense of superiority or inferiority. By acknowledging areas of agreement with the other person and recognizing what we have learned from them, we not only demonstrate our openness but also reduce their defensiveness, encouraging them to explore their own viewpoints more deeply. In this way, the goal of reconsideration is achieved. Continuing to read, Harish's next advantage comes from his disadvantage. He cannot grasp a vast amount of information like the AI debater Deborah, so when faced with Deborah's long list of reasons, Harish only provided two counterarguments. He believes that subsidizing early childhood education cannot solve the harm caused by poverty. First, the government's funds are limited, and many projects require assistance. Early childhood education in the United States may not necessarily be the project that needs this money the most. Second, even with subsidies, early childhood education cannot be completely free, and ultimately, children from poor families still cannot afford to attend good early childhood education programs. In that case, how can this money effectively reduce poverty? Okay, let's see what Harish did right in this round of competition. When people negotiate with others, do they feel that the more reasons they have, the more the balance tilts in their favor? But the author tells us that, on the contrary, true negotiation experts often give fewer reasons. The author has conducted an experiment with colleagues in order to encourage alumni who have never donated to the school to contribute. 2 different persuasive reasons were selected and tested for their impact on the donation rate. One reason was that the funds would benefit the students, teachers, and staff of the school, while the other reason was that donating was an opportunity for the donors to feel good. The results showed that when only one reason was given, 6.5% of the alumni eventually made a donation. However, when both reasons were presented together, the donation rate dropped to below 3%. The effect of one reason was more than twice as effective as the combined effect of both reasons. The author explains that a single argument is like a conversation, but multiple arguments can become an attack, causing resistance. This situation is also common in life. For example, when a couple has a minor disagreement and initially discusses it calmly and objectively, if one person starts bringing up past issues and listing a bunch of evidence and reasons why the other person is wrong, the disagreement immediately escalates into an argument where neither party is willing to back down. Too many reasons not only make people feel attacked and hinder them from rethinking, but also make it easier for the other party to find loopholes. Debater Harish said, "If there are too many viewpoints, you will dilute the power of each viewpoint. Having too many viewpoints actually makes it difficult to explain. I don't know if the audience will accept each viewpoint, and I don't think they will believe that all of them are important enough. Moreover, the more important the topic is to people, the more important the quality of the reasons becomes. Once the other party denies one of our reasons, they can easily overturn our entire viewpoint. This further strengthens their own viewpoint and beliefs, making it unfavorable for rethinking. We actually rarely persuade others to change. Psychologists have long discovered that the most likely person to be persuaded to change their mind is oneself. How can we achieve this? The answer is by asking questions and allowing them to think for themselves. In the debate, Harish didn't simply refute or attack with statements, but used many questions. He first stated his viewpoint that early education is good, but it doesn't mean it should be subsidized by the U.S. government. Then he posed the question, why is it like this? He followed up by asking whether there is a lack of early education in the U.S., whether it helps the most vulnerable groups, why it hasn't been achieved, and why early education in the U.S. is so expensive. Who are the real beneficiaries? By asking the audience questions, he encouraged them to think independently. Asking doesn't necessarily have to convince them, but rather to open their hearts and make them accept that they are capable of making mistakes, initiating a cycle of rethinking. Just as the author concludes, debate is not a tug-of-war where you can simply pull the opponent to your side by exerting force on the rope. Debate is more like an unchoreographed dance, where you need to coordinate with a partner who has a different rhythm and pace. If you are too dominant, your partner will resist, but if you can adjust your steps to match their movements and encourage them to do the same, you are more likely to be in sync. Okay, let's review the essence of the book, Think Again. In the first part of the book, we delve into the obstacles that hinder us from rethinking and how to gain the power to do so through 3 case studies. Firstly, in the story of Mike Lazaridis, co-founder of BlackBerry, we discover that people sometimes give up on rethinking in order to protect their self-identity. To break free from this, the key is to differentiate, to distinguish our present selves from our past selves, to embrace new things, and to have the courage to make mistakes. Only by freeing ourselves from the constraints of our thinking and letting go of past burdens can we separate our personal perspectives from our identities, define our identities based on values rather than opinions, and confront the ever-changing times with a stable sense of self. Next, in the story of Halla Tómasdóttir, a former presidential candidate in Iceland, we learn that confidence is not always the key to promoting rethinking. Sometimes, the imposter syndrome, self-doubt, can also inspire rethinking. We need to find a balance, not being overly confident or overly humble, but being confident with humility. This means having confidence in our abilities while also recognizing that the tools we possess are not always effective and need constant improvement. Finally, in the case of Pixar director Brad Bird, we learn that being atypical, nonconformist, and critical is not a disadvantage, but rather can help with rethinking, while compliance and silence are obstacles to rethinking. The absence of conflict does not necessarily mean harmony, sometimes it is an expression of indifference. However, we also need to control the degree of conflict to prevent task conflict from evolving into relationship conflict. In the second part, we explore how to motivate others to rethink through a fascinating man-machine debate. When persuading others to accept our viewpoints, remember three things. First, patience, listen to the other person's viewpoints, find common ground, so that they can let go of their defenses and reignite their desire for exploration. Second, focus on quality, do not compromise the quality of each reason, maintain the strength of each viewpoint, so that the other person does not resist and loosen their inherent beliefs. Third, diverse communication, not just stating, but through questioning, stimulate the other person's independent thinking, thus gaining the ability to rethink. In fact, rethinking is not a burden, it is like the annual physical examination we undergo to check if there are any changes in our physical condition. The same principle applies to other important aspects of life, such as our personal goals, work situation, and mindset. Of course, it can also be applied to broader areas, such as teams, companies, and schools. Rethinking doesn't always bring immediate results, but it allows us to take the time to reflect on the current situation, break the routine, and embrace change. Portuguese poet Fernando Pessoa once said, "The biggest difference between people is whether you have truly lived for over 10,000 days or if you have only lived one day, repeating it over 10,000 times." I believe that this is the greatest value that rethinking brings us. It allows us to live more awakened, understanding when to move forward, when to step back, when to let go of old positions, and when to embrace our new selves. Congratulations on finishing another book. Thank you for your support. Please subscribe to our Wisdom Planet audiobook channel. Like and share it with family and friends. Wisdom worth spreading and opening up a better future. Thank you and see you again.